Remington podcast, where we take a deep dive into all things ammunition. I'm your host, Audrey Mayes, and today we're joined with ballistics engineer Jimmy Lawrence, owner of Bear Hunting Magazine, Kolby Morehead, and good Lord, what's your title?
Director of Product Engineering.
Thank you. Director of Product Engineering, Jon Langenfeld.
Thank you.
Yeah. That was bad. So we're going to take a deep dive into bear hunting this time around. And Kolby, you're a bit of an expert.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what I'm told.
How many different kinds of bear have you hunted, do you think?
Oh, just black bear.
Just black bear?
Yeah.
Yeah. You were showing me a picture earlier of like a cinnamon phase, though.
Yeah. One of the color phases.
Yeah.
I've gotten black, chocolate, and cinnamon. I'm a blonde shy of slam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't even know there was a bear slam.
Oh, that was made up.
I was like, dang.
If the turkey people can have it, they can have it.
If the turkey people
Yeah.
can have
Let
it,
'em
we
have
can have
You
it.
know, that's fair. That's fair. But you were saying that you've hunted bear in all kinds of disciplines, right?
Yeah. So I've hunted them over bait, been on spot and stock out in the West. I've been with hounds, and then we've also tried to trap one, like foot snare one, up in Maine. And so it's interesting. Like every particular type of hunt I've gone on, there's different challenges. There's gives and takes on all of them. But the one thing that is sure is it's going to be work. you know, like nothing comes easy. And the other thing is everyone that dedicates themselves to a particular discipline inside of bear hunting, they're so dedicated to it, and they become experts inside of that thing, and they become really good at it. And sometimes they make it look easier than it really is. But a lot of things inside of bear hunting, especially the hounds, like it's really more of a lifestyle. Like you have to have those hounds year round. You have to train them like it's part of your life, like almost part of it, almost kind of an identity. And then with trapping, it was really cool. I went in not really knowing what I was going to think or what I was going to experience, but just the amount of information that the guy that I was with knew, like even like how he can get a bear to step here, step there, and most of all, like that he was able to be selective on the class of bear that he took by how he set his snare to where it would only go off if it was a heavier, more mature bear. And that's one of the reasons that you bear hunt from a lot of these other disciplines, other than spot and stock, is you can be more selective. Like you're able to go after a larger class animal, more mature animal, you know, and typically you'd be after a boar, you know, a larger male. And it's been great to go and to experience this type, like all the different types of hunting with people that are just like sold out for it, you know?
Yeah.
And then last year I had a really good year baiting, and I got a really good solid, a 400-pound plus bear here in Arkansas, which was great and hard. My frame pack saw thousands of pounds on it last year.
How big do the bears get in Arkansas usually, would you say?
You know, I've heard of 600-plus pound ones in Arkansas. Predominantly the largest bears you'll hear most of the time are more on the eastern seaboard, kind of like that North Carolina coastline.
Sure.
And they can get, I've even heard of 800-pound bears, which is like rare, but, you know, just some huge bears.
Yeah, and you haven't just hunted in Arkansas; you've traveled all over.
No, I've hunted in Arkansas. I've hunted in Canada. I've been over in Oregon a couple times, and in Maine. So I've done east, west, and then here, kind of like southern.
Yeah.
So what drives that size? Is it the habitat, like how much virgin woods they have out there, or is it diet based?
Well, you know, like a milder winter, like a boar doesn't have to den if he doesn't want to. A sow has to den because once she comes of age and she starts reproducing, a sow will have cubs in the den, and then they'll spend another den cycle the following year with her. So she'll have a set of cubs in the den. She'll have a year where she doesn't have cubs, and then the following year she'll have a new set of cubs in the den with her. And so she has to, from a biological, you know, sense, like she has to den no matter what the conditions are.
Right.
Whereas a boar, he doesn't have to den, you know, the full length, like it's more weather driven oftentimes with them. And I mean, they're learning new things about bears all the time because they're starting to put more collars on them. They're able to put GPS collars now. here in Arkansas, they only collar sows, but there's other places where they'll collar boars, and I don't think we have a ton of data on those projects yet, but I'm looking forward to the time that we do, because we have so much information about whitetail, and there's been so much given to learning about them, and we're finding that bears, from what I've been told so far, bears, depending on their habitat and where they are, they're radically different from other bears. The only thing you can trust that whatever they're keyed in on food wise, it's like you'll know they'll be there and they need water, but what their patterns can vary from
Their hobbies.
Yeah, and even like where they den, is crazy depending on where they are. So like if they're in a flood stage area, a lot of times, especially, we've got an article coming out in the next issue of the magazine where in Mississippi, like they have to go up and they'll climb a huge cypress tree, and then they'll go over into the hollow part and set up, and they'll nest with their cubs
in the tree.
In the tree. So the biologist has to get in a whole rope gear situation and climb up.
Slowly peek over.
Yeah, and even here in Arkansas, the large carnivore biologist Myron Means, he has to, like, they've used ladders. They've had to go up in trees. And one of the podcasts we've done so far with Jim Ballard, she writes the Black Bear Biology column inside of the magazine. She had one where they had to put the ladder down into a tree, and she climbed down into the ladder, and they had to pull it out so she could work with the sow, and then put it back down in there, and she came back out.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd be so comfy in the middle of a tree with the with the bear.
Yeah. Well, when they're in torpor, when they're in that den stage, like, they're still aware, but they're a lot more docile typically than, they act different. It's weird. So
Just drowsy.
Yeah, they're not true hibernators. Like, they're not just passed out and unaware. And yeah, it's really cool. And going and doing these den visits have been really rewarding too. Just being able to interact with them and just see what they den in is
You
cool.
were telling me a little bit about that earlier. What exactly is a den visit?
Yeah, so a den visit is something to where biologists will have collared bears, and so they'll collar them, and then they'll go whenever they den up, and they'll find them, and they're checking the health of the bear population. So they're wanting to see how healthy the mom is, how healthy the cubs are, how many cubs she has. They're pulling different samples from, like, they're pulling hair samples from the cubs to see, like, if they get some sort of match of where they can figure out, how many different boars, are inside that litter. Like, because a sow can be bred by multiple different bears. So, like, there could be, like, half cubs, like, where it's like they're half brothers and sisters,
I did not know that.
Yeah. They're totally, well, another cool thing is their black bears are unique where they have delayed implantation, to where they'll be bred inside of the bear rut around that May-June timeline is what I've heard. And then, but the fertilized egg won't attach to the uterine wall unless the mother is healthy enough to carry it to term inside of the den and stuff. And so we even experienced it a few years here in Arkansas, where they think that our harsh drought made half of the sows that should have had cubs reabsorb that into their body and not actually have cubs that year. And so, I don't know, black bear biology is just fascinating.
Yeah.
Because they don't really track along with any other critter.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like cats until you get up to that optional comfort needed situation. That's pretty handy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and is that just high stress, you think, or is it like literally like fat content? Do they have any idea what leads to that?
I mean, I think they have a lot of thoughts and hypotheses, but I don't think that they have it nailed down to, like, this is the end all be all of, like, exactly what this biology is, like, hardwired. The general thing is just whether the sow is healthy enough or not. Gotcha. Because what happened was we had that drought, and there wasn't a lot of vegetation. There wasn't a lot of stuff for bears to eat. And then they think that part of the half of the sows went ahead and aborted their pregnancy. And then the mass crop just all fell at once. And so they just had a smorgasbord of just food everywhere. So the food availability went from down here to way up here. And they're thinking that maybe those sows just, didn't abort the pregnancy just yet. And, maybe where they were on the verge of it. And then all of a sudden it was like food everywhere.
Right.
Because even the sows that had cubs in the dens were super fat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't know that, like, bear biology was so much different than other things.
Yeah.
Like, that's awesome. I know that John has never been on a bear hunt, but has dreams of it.
Yeah, one of these days I'll get out there and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, what you want to do.
Oh, I want to go to Alaska and hunt brown bear.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to do it, go for the big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gonna try that new 360 buck hammer?
If that's what I had in my hands, there've actually been, there was 2 black bears killed with it real early on in the prototype phase by a couple of folks that work for us, and I seen pictures of them. I think they were in Canada. Big bears, and that'd be a great stand rifle. Shooting one of those 200 grain Corlocks. Great penetration, wouldn't have a problem. Easy to maneuver up in the stand.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, if I were going on a big brown bear hunt in Alaska, I've got a particular synthetic stock 416 Remington.
Oh, okay.
That's going to go.
Yeah. Let it bark.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you have to, so far, I haven't had any close encounters with anything that I've had to shoot twice. But if you end up in the alder thickets, I want something that's going to put them down if they're coming after me.
Yeah.
You can cycle a little faster than a lever gun.
Well, it's just going to hit them a little harder.
Yeah.
You know that I was talking to somebody earlier. Like one of the most used cartridges up in the northeast corner and like the eastern side. A lot of those guys are using that 35 Remington.
Oh yeah, well
that 200 grain.
Well,
yeah,
that's the same bullet in the 360, the 200, and you're getting a little more velocity out of it with the 360. I think it's been a minute since I've looked at the 35 rim numbers, but I'm thinking it's around maybe 150, 200 feet per second faster. So yeah, I mean, if you like the 35 Remington, there's nothing not to like about the 360.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you were going to take, a certain bullet type to bear hunt, what would you be taking?
Well, I think that depends on where I'm going and the size of the bear, and also the cartridge that I'm going to use. So, like with anything that you're going to hunt, bullet selection is critical. I'm looking at how big's the animal, how big are the bones, what is the shot opportunities if I'm sitting on a stand and I've got time to let them turn broadside, things like that. So, you're definitely going to want something that's got enough integrity to get into the vitals, get into the chest cavity. I like to punch 2 holes in them. If they're broadside, I want an exit hole just because if I have to take an angled shot, I want something that's going to have enough penetration to get where it needs to go. So if it'll go out the other side broadside, then it's usually, I'm happy with it. But, so why don't we see, what do you like to use for cartridges? And then we can kind of bounce back and forth and talk about, bullet weights or construction or whatever.
Yeah. You can really... A black bear is soft. As long as you stay away from that shoulder, you don't really have a lot to worry about. And we typically, their organs are set back further than like a whitetail. And so we usually say middle of the middle and then come forward just a couple inches, forward a little. So, trying to center punch the lungs. And that gives you, the more room for error, And it really doesn't take a lot to punch through a bear. The biggest thing is I know that, you don't really want to shoot anything that's kind of like a hollow point because the fat content and stuff. You really want something that gets some penetration before it expands. And but we even shot a guy that I was with on a hunt last year. He was good with his 6.5 Creedmoor. He decided to take that. We shot the Remington Premier Long Range, and that bear didn't go anywhere. It rolled, and then it 10 yards, and then it was. Nothing.
Yeah, and those bullets do good. They hold together. You get good deep penetration there. I think if you're going to hunt with something that's down in say 6.5, 270, maybe 708 or whatever, I'd be looking at heavier for caliber core-locked type ammo. Say for an example, if you're using a 270, I'd probably be looking at the 150 grain category. And then if you're getting up into your magnums, again, I'd probably would still lean toward, especially if they're fast, so like a 7mm Remington Magnum, I'd probably be looking at 160s, 175s. I think the 140s would work.
Yeah.
But you may get a little more expansion because it is traveling at a higher velocity. So having that extra bullet weight would definitely help. And then, you probably don't need anything over a 338 for black bear. Not that you can't use something bigger, but I think when you get into 30 caliber, probably a 30-06, I'd be using 180s. in the 300 Magnums. Again, there 168 or up. I would probably take 180s. And then in the 338, we're probably looking at a standard 225, something like that. But the core lock stuff would work great for the size of black bears, even your bigger ones. If I were going to, I know there's big black bears in Alaska. If I were doing that from a cartridge selection, I'd probably be looking at 30-06 and maybe a little up. That's my personal preference. Something that's got a little bit bigger bullet diameter than a 6.5 Creedmoor. But and at the end of the day, if you've got a bullet that can get to the vitals, then it comes down to shot placement. Just like with anything that you're shooting, and with most animals, that lung shot is got the largest room for error. If you don't hit it right in the center, that's the biggest target. And so, but yeah, I mean, there's plenty of options to pick from that would be absolutely adequate for black bear.
Yeah, I generally think that I want to take something that has at least 140 grain. And then plus, inside of what they do. I mean, one of the things I've wondered, though, is, like, what would you take bullet-wise, or what would you think of, say, from, like, a place where you'd be, like, 200 yards away versus if you were, really comfortable with your shot and stuff. Because, like, I know some guys that shoot stuff out in the West at, like, 1,000,
Sure.
like, they're comfortable with doing that. They're dialed in. They're shooting high BC, like... I mean, calibers we hadn't heard of, and they're using their kestrels and stuff like that. But what would be thoughts that you would have whenever you're going to take a longer shot? Because one of the things that we got to talk about when we were in Oregon this last year was bullet expansion and what it takes, because different bullets require different, from what I remember, velocities to have true expansion. And so it's like, well, in a target scenario, we can shoot this far, but will it perform inside of this live action thing? And it's like at some point it doesn't matter whether you can shoot that far or not, which is the way that I grew up thinking. But our longest shot would be 400, and pretty much everything I would think would expand in the rifles we were shooting.
Sure, yeah. I would say, and you're right, today hunting bullets, they've understand that there is a terminal velocity that's required to get that bullet to open. And because consumers are shooting at extended ranges relative to, our past history at game, the design of projectiles has changed so that they can weaken the bullet so that it will open at a lower impact velocity. So one thing to watch is, depending on the type of bullet that you're going to shoot, that it's not too weak. So that way, if you got an up close, 40-yard shot with a high velocity cartridge, that the bullet has enough integrity to hold together still and penetrate adequately and not come apart and just cause basically like a big nasty flesh wound. So conventional cup and core bullets, out of non-Magnum cartridges, that 400-yard mark, you're pushing the limits of expansion. And again, one of the things, I don't know if you have a recommended minimum energy requirement, if you've ever seen those kind of numbers. I know that they're out there for whitetail and things, just kind of what kind of energy you want to add impact. So that way, if you're going to use a lesser cartridge, maybe you need to limit how far you're going to shoot so that you do have that minimum level. I'm sure you can Google it and find some rule of thumb numbers for bear, but I'm thinking whitetail was around 1,000, if memory serves correct. But why would you ever want to shoot a bear at 400 yards though? I mean, if you can get closer, why not? I mean, that's half the fun of shooting or hunting bear.
Being a good hunter is getting close, right?
Especially if you're hunting a predator.
Yeah.
No, I feel like that would be a really hard time to come up with both ends of that spectrum in a single bullet. Because like Jon's talking about, if you can make your bullet perform that far out, then all of a sudden when you get close, you're just going to blow his fat up. I'm always thinking about momentum when I'm thinking about a bear, because you got to get through all of that. And controlled expansion matters on your kind of classic 30-06 type cartridges. But if I was going to pick one off the shelf, I'd be going with something with a lot of mass, like 45-70. That's kind of what my gut would go with.
Kind of like the 360.
Yeah.
200 grain bullet. It's coming out of there about 2,200 feet per second. You're probably going to get, 20 something inches of penetration. Probably 70-80% weight retention. I mean, typically when you run slower velocity, you don't have as much shock. I mean, if you ever seen gel block shot with, say, a 7mm Magnum, you can really see that energy transfer and the block flopping around and chunks fly.
In the first.
Oh, yeah,
6 inches, yeah.
And then you shoot one, say, with a 360, and that it's going to impact at a lower velocity. Though it has a big frontal area, it's going to make a good, permanent wound cavity. The temporary one isn't as large, so it doesn't shock as much, but you're going to get, very adequate penetration. You're going to tear up the vitals and not have any problems. Hence what we were talking about before when you're saying a lot of the people up in the Northeast like the 35 Remington.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
we talked about, the possibilities of what over-penetration is, or if that even exists. Well, Kolby brought up earlier that a lot of bear hunters who hunt with hounds don't want it to penetrate through.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to hit their dogs,
Sure. Yeah,
So
I
is there
can see
something that you would aim for that?
Well, I mean, so I'd be looking at a weaker bullet, so maybe instead of shooting, say I got a 30-06, maybe instead of shooting a 220 or a 200, I'm going to come down and shoot a 150.
Okay.
It's higher velocity. It's not going to have as much penetration. It's going to open up quicker. But, for the size of black bear, you're still going to be able to get in, center of the chest cavity probably, and, 3/4 way to the other side with it, and, in long shots and not, worry about blowing out the other side and hitting one of your dogs.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
So if a hound dog's not involved, I'm starting to think this is one of the places where a monolithic would really shine.
It could. I mean, the copper bullets like the Premier Cut line is definitely very tough construction. It's going to have high weight retention. So since you're not going to lose mass, you're going to get very deep penetration. I mean, I would have no issue shooting bears at extreme angles with those if I had to. I'd have no issues putting one right on the point of the shoulder. You're going to probably break them both depending on the cartridge you're shooting, if it's got enough mass and velocity to carry through to the other side.
Yeah.
But I mean, for what we're looking at, I think you could probably take core locked, you could take Premier long range. That would probably be another one if you're worried about over penetrating on a dog, because those bullets are designed. So it's one of the few, Jimmy, to touch on your point of having too much expansion up close, but yet still expand long range. The Premier long range, it'll do it. And so I've seen mush samples out to 1,000 yards, and I've seen animals shot in heavy bone up close, and it worked very, very well. And that's just the construction. It's got the the electroplating of the jacket on, and so it's just essentially bonded, and so it's going to hold together. A projectile that isn't bonded, that'll open up at long range, I would not use and shoot something up close, just because it's going to come apart, and so it's not strong enough to hold together.
You're going to have that like cup and core separation.
Well, it'll be more than that. I mean, it'll be fragments.
Shatter.
It'll be fragments and chunks of jacket and lead flowing off, and then you're losing all your mass quick in a very short amount of distance, and you don't get the penetration. And so, but yeah, impacts hold together really well at close range. And so, I mean, we do those, and I think the smallest one is in a 6.5 Creedmoor, the 140, and then we've got them all the way up into the 300 Magnums, and so and everything in between. But that would be a good one. Like I said, if you're looking for something that if you're going to take a shot that's, at extended ranges or 40, 50 yards or whatever, that one would be excellent. And so like I said, just look at your situation, look at where you're hunting, think about how, it's the size of the animal. I hear a lot of people just use their whitetail rifles on black bear. I've, read a lot about that. And so, I mean, if you're comfortable with that, then, select the right kind of bullet and go after it.
Again, type of bear and shot placement, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, punching through a a brown bear shoulder has to be different than punching through a black bear shoulder.
A lot more there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, much bigger animals. And also, too, I mean, I depending on where you're hunting and the type of stuff, nobody wants to follow up a wounded animal that is potentially dangerous. And so, being able to put them down with a shoulder shot or something like that so they don't get into, a very thick, dense brush, alder thickets or whatever, and then you're going to have to follow them up, and it's going to be probably a very close encounter. So, I mean, I've read, I think it was one of the more popular guides in Alaska was talking about a lot of people used to use 30-06 on a regular basis. Guides have carried them. Like I said, for me, if I'm going to Alaska, that's going to be probably a once or twice in a lifetime trip. So I'm going to stack the chips in my favor. I'm going to shoot the largest gun that I'm comfortable with, so I know recoil limitations. And for me personally, it would probably be, I've got a fast 338 that I would use. It's a fairly light gun. If I don't, depending on the age I am when I go, if I don't want to carry and lug around my 416, but
does it tickle the shoulder?
I don't notice it anymore.
Oh,
but
you might though if you get later in years.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry to drop that idea in your head.
But
Lord, I apologize.
I think that brings up another big difference from the whitetail. If you're looking at it just as a target to put down with the energy versus a black bear, even is you bring in some of that safari risk of I might have to actually have a stopping rifle also. So then you look at the speed of your reloads and how much recoil takes you off target. Because, you hit a deer and he's headed the other way, but if things go wrong and you miss a black bear and he's like, what's that? You might want a lever or a pump even.
Have you ever had any close encounters with black bear?
Not shot. I got between a sow and her 2 cubs in Canada once, and I didn't know the cubs were behind me. But she was woofing and popping her jaws at me.
Yep.
But anyways, it was, I just looked at her, I was like, you're bluffing, but I'm just going to get up the tree real quick. I was at my stand, I was climbing it, and whenever we went in, we busted them up, and it's like, oh, there's a bear right there. And what I didn't know until, I had been in the stand after she did all that, I'd been up in the stand for probably 5 or 10 minutes, and then something catches my eye, and I look up, and there's 2 cubs just hanging out in the tree.
Oh, dang.
And
in your tree?
No.
Okay.
It's about 20 yards in front of me.
Gotcha.
And I was like, I had no clue the whole time. But yeah, that's probably the closest. I've been in the stand. I had a huge chocolate bear look up at me last year after I had shot my bear. I shot my bear, and probably 3-4 minutes later, the biggest bear I've ever seen comes in, and then he circles around, he catches a glimpse of me, and then he walks to the base of my tree and just looks up. And I'm like, it's like he wasn't even scared of me. And anyways, that's an experience you get in Canada more so than down here. Down here, they're more jumpy and stuff.
Sure.
Like,
Do you think it's because they don't hang around humans often up there?
yeah, I don't think they see people all that much. And a lot in Canada, you'll find that a lot of the people that live there don't bear hunt. Like, they don't see them as big of a resource as they are in the conversations I've had, the areas that I've been in.
Sure.
But most of the bear hunting up in Canada seems to be, at least through the outfitters and everything that I talk to, is mostly Americans coming up.
Yeah.
And which is good because it helps their populations, like all their moose and elk and deer up there. But yeah, it's different. Like, you don't have to worry as much about scent control and everything up in Canada. Like, you don't have to worry about the wind as much. You're never going to fool a bear's nose.
Right.
There's just no way. And but yeah, going up there, the bears just behave differently. Like, they just act differently. And it's cool. Like, you'll go up there and you'll just, you might have a day or two where you're not seeing much, and then all of a sudden you might see 15 in an evening. Like, it's hit or miss depending on the conditions. And but it's such a cool experience. One of the things I love about baiting bears is you really get to see just how different they are. Like, you'll see whitetail, and it's like all whitetails seem to act kind of the same. They're jumpy. They, kind of seem on edge most of the time. They move around, quite a bit. But with a black bear, the first outfitter I ever went with, he was like, don't treat this like a whitetail. When this bear comes in, just expect him to stick around for a long time and mosey around. And so, even if a bear comes in and they're nervy, once they get settled on a bait, it's kind of hard to push them off. Even this last year in Arkansas, I was having to push bears off of my bait once they were in there and comfortable, like I would go down in there to rebait, and it was hard to like get them off there. It was predominantly like younger male bears. So like they were probably trying to get there because I had some big bears on the bait, and so they were probably looking for their opportunity to get in on that bait when the big bear wasn't like pushing them off and stuff. And one of them even broke him to the back of my truck
while you were hunting.
He followed like so. I used my bait in Arkansas last year as an opportunity to let people experience seeing bears for the first time. You know, like it was a really hard bait to go in and set up because it was round trip was a quarter of a mile, and you're dropping elevation, you're coming back up, and you're going down heavy, coming up light. And it was one of those things I had to go refill that bait every 3 days because it would just be empty or almost empty. And so I had friends that volunteered to help me. I was like, hey, this is actually pretty cool. Like they'll maybe get to see their first bear. And everybody that went with me, except for the first guy, got to see their first bear, got to really having close encounters and experience it. So it was pretty cool. But the first one that happened to, I was like, all right, well, let's just, before we set up, before we put our packs on, let's just ease over to the edge and look down on this. So we would go down and there would be a bench, and then it would just be a sheer drop off. So it was a natural funnel anyways. And so we came over and peeked over, and there was a bear, and he just caught a glimpse, and the bear took off. Well, we're back at the truck, and we're putting on our packs and everything. And I'm like, there's a bear. The wind wasn't blowing that way, but we had just walked down that. It had seen us. It smelled it. It's like something was off about this bear, and it was just coming directly at us. And so I just started like talking at it, and it turned, and it went probably 12, 13 yards to the side of the truck and just started laid over and just chilled. It's like, what is going on here? Like, this is not typical bear behavior. Yeah. Like,
I'll help you carry this.
He's conditioned somewhat. And I told my buddy, I was like, I don't like this. I was like, he's going to break into my truck. And so I just pick up a rock, and I start walking towards him a little bit, and he's not backing away, and like he's acting like he kind of bluff charges me a little bit. And so the one thing about bears is what they can see a lot of times they're not afraid of. Mm-hmm. But if you can do something like popping a stick will make a bear just so nervy, because these big bears, when they try to intimidate and they come into a bait and stuff, they'll like walk over saplings and crack sticks and stuff, and so that's like makes them
puff up.
Yeah. And so they're coming in flexing, and so I just picked up a rock and threw it behind him, and once he heard something behind him, he turned and he just ran off.
Took off.
So I just locked one side of my bed cap, and we make a trip. We come back, and the bed cap's open. There's scratches all around both of the things to turn to open it. Mm-hmm. There's scratches on my door handle, my driver's side. I was like, he knows what he's doing.
He's been in a truck before. Yeah.
And I looked back, and I noticed there was a 50-pound bag of dog food missing out of the bed of my truck. And I'm like, we just got robbed.
Sly bear.
And then we look over, and about, 60, 80 yards through the woods, we see the bright colored bag of dog food, mm-hmm. and then see the bear there. It's like, there he is. And so I just take off after him.
Trying to chase him off.
Yeah. So we ran him off and got it, and everything was kosher after that. But, it was one of those fun, like, bear encounters that was like, I need to be wise inside the scenario, but I don't have to be afraid, because, mm-hmm. People think bears are really aggressive, and, that could be said about grizz at times, but black bears, typically, they're scaredy cats.
They're pretty
mostly curious, right?
Curious,
yeah,
is what
they're
I was
curious.
Gonna say.
Yeah.
When I went, I go elk hunting up in Colorado, and I was walking up the side of a mountain one time. It's just covered in sagebrush, and there's these two black bear. One's like a brown phase, one's definitely black. So it's absolutely two different bears. And I'm walking up the side of the mountain with my buddy behind me, and I stop. And my buddy's like, what the heck? And I'm like, there's a bear right there just looking at me. He like sticks his head out of the sagebrush. I don't know if it's he or she, whatever. Mm-hmm. Sticks his head out of the sagebrush, and then just pops back in. And then I walk a couple more feet, and then the brown one comes out. And then just go back in. And like the whole way up the side of the mountain, they're checking us out. Like they have it's either like they don't know what we are, and they're like, trying trying to figure us out.
Keeping an eye on you.
Or they know what we are, and they're just watching us to make sure that we don't, mess with them or whatever. But yeah, they're just really curious, interesting animals.
I mean, they learn things and they pattern things. I mean, that's one of the things that we talk about as far as trying to set up a really good bait. For a bear, we want to be consistent. We want them to know we're coming in. We want them to pattern us. And so if they can pattern us, they become more comfortable with that. And so they're not as nervous whenever it comes time for the opening of season for that bigger, more mature boar to eventually come in. And I mean, they're curious. They're observant. Like they'll pattern people, and they'll sense when something's off most of the time.
Yeah.
You know? They're hard.
I mean, definitely not a whitetail.
Yeah.
Like, just different from deer. You'll never just see a ungulate, like, out there checking you out. Like, they're gone.
Yeah.
They hear you. So, just
Peace.
weird.
Well, I mean, this time of year, they're a little more curious, but during season, they're...
Yeah.
Which I'm excited about this season in Arkansas, this early season, to see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you going to be bow hunting? Or Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anything else to add about bear hunting?
What kind of trophies, as far as like, do you like rugs? You like, taxidermy?
So we utilize a lot inside of a bear. So we usually will do like a European mount on the head. We'll get the hide tanned.
Yeah.
And you can do different things. Like you could do a rug, you could do a half shoulder mount. Full body, half body, like typical.
Depends
stuff.
how much room you got.
One of the cool thing is like, if you got height but not a bunch of like wideness, like you could just put one standing on his back legs holding a tree or something.
Yeah.
And then we render down the fat, and we do a lot of stuff with the bear fat once we render it down. We've made soaps out of it, lotions. It makes great chapstick. What else have we used? I've made candles with it. So, and these candles burn a long time. So you can put your own scents in there with essential oils. It's good for anything skin based, because since we're critters, like our body, like our skin's an organ, and like typically when you go to a store, you buy a plant based soap, and it can be irritating. So an animal lard based soap is a lot better for your skin, and then it's great to cook in. Yeah. So it's shelf stable for a long time after you render it down. And we just render it down and store it inside of your typical mason jar. And it's great for cooking food. It's pastry chefs love it because it doesn't lend its own flavor to whatever they're cooking. So historically, it's really good in pie crusts, homemade biscuits, like anything pastry dough related. We had a guy make a guy that cooked a lot of Creole food with he made, I think it's called a roux for gumbo. And we heard it was just great. And then bear meat is amazing. So we eat a ton of bear meat. Like we go through bear meat before we touch our deer meat.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I made bear meat sloppy joes one time. They were pretty killer. I'm not gonna lie. Probably the best sloppy joes I've ever had.
I don't think I've ever ate bear. Have you ate
I've
bear?
always wanted to try it. Yeah. I think I tasted it once when I was real young.
Invite me back down.
Yeah. Bring some sloppy joes next time.
Come on, Jimmy.
We'll have lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll get your Alaska hunt soon. I don't know.
Yeah, it's all about priority. They're not cheap.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. I'm hoping Kolby here will take me on my first bear hunt.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Black bear's more doable.
It's a 3-hour drive, though, so...
Oh,
keep your expectations
the 16-hour drive to Colorado is
Unless
easier.
you want Canada A.
B?
B? Yeah. Well, there you have it, guys. Remington is on the rise. Like, comment, subscribe, and be sure to share this podcast with your hunting or shooting buddies. If you have any questions for me or Jimmy or John or Kolby here, you can email us at podcast@remington.com. Don't forget to subscribe to Bear Hunting Magazine. Thanks for listening.